So the last few videos of this section, we're going to be moving on from layout and color and focusing on text. So let's get rid of all our styles and indeed our content so far. And we're going to start by seeing how we can change the font or typeface of our text. So let's start by adding a little bit of text. I'm going to use the phenomenally boring, this is some text. But you can use something even more exciting than that if you like. Now, of course, to style that, probably the easiest way is to set up some styles for our P tags. And before I do anything new and fancy, I always like just to check that everything's kind of connected up right. So you might do something like font size 200%. And then just have a look. There we go. So this CSS is definitely connecting to this content. So even if I have a problem with my font changing CSS, I know that it's not down to an issue that I've spelled style like that or something like that. So that's a good trick that I always use before I'm doing something new. So changing the font with CSS is pretty straightforward. We use the property font family. Now the challenge with font family is that you have to remember what the font families are. Now fortunately, my text editor here has given me a few that I can work with. So let's go for fantasy to get something that hopefully will look completely different to plain old text. And there we go. You can see this is definitely a different sort of font than what we would have got without it. So now we've changed the font, but how do we know what fonts are available other than the ones that happen to appear in the drop-down list? Well, I would do a quick Google of web safe fonts. And then the top result for me is this w3schools.com link, which is perfect. And then this will give you a list of the fonts that are pretty safe to use. That means they're supported by most browsers. So we've got Georgia here, Palatino, Linotype, Times New Roman, and sans serif. That means without little ticks. So Arial, Arial Black, Comic Sans, etc. And a couple of monospace fonts as well, in which all of the characters have the same width. They're particularly good if you want to display code on your website. So you can try some of those out. Let's just pop on one. We'll try Arial, just because it looks different once again than what we have. So Arial. There we go. Let's refresh. There we go. So that's what Arial looks like. Now you'll notice though that most of these in fact have not just one, but they have several different ones. Most have three. So we've got Times New Roman, Times and Serif. Now this is actually a really nice feature of CSS fonts and it's known as fallback. So if the Times New Roman font is available on the system of whoever's looking at your website, then it will display the text with Times New Roman font. If not, it'll fall back to the Times font. And if it doesn't have that, it'll fall back to the standard serif font, whatever that is on the machine of your user. So if you're going to change fonts, it's always a good idea to have several different ones so that you can be sure that you're getting something that looks close to the font that you really want, even if they haven't got the perfect font already on their system. So you should always have several different font families, getting increasingly more general as you go across the commas like that. So that's pretty much it when it comes to web safe fonts. You'll notice though that there's not a huge number of these, and if you're really picky about what you want your website to look like, there might not be one there that's close enough to the vision that you have in mind. So I'm going to show you as well how to use Google fonts in your websites. So to get there, just Google Google Fonts, and that will take you to google.com/fonts. This is a repository of a huge number of fonts which are free to use and hosted by Google and give you a lot more flexibility when it comes to choosing that perfect font. So let's see how we might use one of these fonts. Let's try and find one that looks pretty. I'm going to go for this one, Shadows into Light. Okay, so if you want to use one of these fonts, you click on the little arrow there, you select which one you need. There's only one option here, so I'll select that one. And again, choose which character set you want. I only want the one that's available. And then you add this code to your website. So I'm going to select this and we'll talk about what this code is in a minute. And then let's add that in to our websites. As long as it's somewhere in the head, it doesn't matter. I'm going to pop it up there. Now what this is a link to an external style sheet. And we're going to be seeing how we can use those in our own websites in a couple of videos time, but it's a good opportunity to see what they are. You'll remember that we've covered inline CSS, which is where the CSS is right there with the tag that it belongs to. And then we looked at internal CSS, which is what we've been using since. But internal CSS for production websites is not a great solution because it means you have to copy the CSS onto every page, which means it has to be downloaded every time by the user and potentially has to be updated in several different pages every time you change it. So the general solution for production CSS is to have it in a completely separate file. That means it only has to be stored on your server once, and it only has to be downloaded by the user once, even if they visit several different pages on your site. And the way to do that is using this link code here. So what we're effectively doing is we're linking to a special CSS style sheet on Google servers, which will allow us to use their particular font. So in a couple of videos time, I'll show you how we can use external CSS we create in our own websites. But it's very similar to what we're doing here. All right, so now we've included that external CSS. We just need to select the right font family. So you can see here, I can actually just copy that from the Google Fonts page and replace that there. Oops, I should replace that too. And then, so Shadows into Light is the full name of the font. And if for some reason that doesn't work, then it's going to fall back to the standard cursive font. So let's have a look. Wonderful. So we've got our really nice font and it's freely available. I haven't paid anything for that. I'm not even hosting it myself. It's being hosted by Google's servers. So Google Fonts is a great way to get more customized fonts to get something that's really perfect for your website. All right, now we've got our website looking great in terms of fonts. We're going to start customizing the text a little bit. So looking at things like bold, underline, and italics using CSS.